Hello everyone, my name is Mallory Fenn, and I am coming to you live from my apartment once again to talk about, do archaeologists dig dinosaurs? The simple answer is no, but the more detailed answer is a lot more interesting. To give a brief review of what we've already covered, I work for the Florida Public Archaeology Network as a public archaeology coordinator with the Southeast region. We are a state-run, statewide organization that aims to educate the public using public outreach, assist the State Division of Historic Resources, and assist local governments. We've spent the last month talking about what is archaeology, how do archaeologists work, what kind of tools do we need to bring into the field, how do archaeologists study climate change, and how do we know how old an artifact is. This week we'll be talking about one of the most common misconceptions about archaeology, which is, do archaeologists dig dinosaurs? The answer is no. As much as people love to ask me, have you found any pterodactyls? Have you found any triceratops? What an exciting time for you. Those are not things that I do. We do lots and lots of exciting things as archaeologists, but we simply do not dig dinosaurs. As public educators, we've found that it's really best to rip the band-aid off early when talking about this subject because it can be very disappointing for a lot of people. Disappointing small children is a big part of an archaeologist's job, it turns out. So the short answer is no, archaeologists don't study dinosaurs at all. The long answer is that archaeology and paleontology do intersect a little bit when it comes to extinct animals like megafauna. Megafauna literally translates to giant animal. Archaeology is the study of the human past, and paleontology is the study of all life on Earth up until the Holocene period, right up around 11,700 years ago. Another difference between paleontology and archaeology is that most, if not all, humans are too young as a species to be fossilized. The subfield of biological anthropology, which involves human evolution, is constantly changing. I've sort of given up updating this part of my presentation because it changes that much. But for now, we can safely say that anatomically modern humans showed up around 300,000 years ago. There is a lot of time on Earth happening without us. Given that artifacts are things made or modified by humans, artifacts can only be as old as human beings are. And this means, sadly, that there is really no overlap between humans and dinosaurs whatsoever. The Flintstones was indeed not a documentary. We do both study the past, but we do this in different ways and with different focuses. It is, in fact, such an easy thing to confuse and a question that we get so often that we have made coloring pages, which we will link to in the comments below, which you can download, print, and color upon for free 99. Mind you, it's very understandable that people get paleontology and archaeology mixed up, but it can be a little frustrating because the confusion seems to follow you everywhere sometimes.
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird won't sing, Mama's gonna buy you.
When we look very, very far back into Florida's archaeological record, a lot of the animals that human beings were interacting with were megafauna. This means that Florida archaeologists who study the Paleo-Indian period, which is the oldest period of human inhabitation in Florida, will sometimes have to be looking at ground sloth bones, or mammoth bones, or mastodon bones. In fact, the oldest evidence for human inhabitation in Florida was found on a mastodon tusk. There's a bunch of slash marks on this tusk. This artifact was uncovered by the team of Dr. Jesse Halligan of Florida State University at the Page Ladson site in North Florida and dates roughly to 14,550 years ago. There are a couple sites in Florida where archaeology and paleontology do overlap a little bit because they are so old and they are so far back in the archaeological record that we're actually seeing a lot of extinct animals that human beings interacted with. Another one of these sites is the Cutler Fossil Site. This is located in Miami-Dade County on the grounds of the Deering Estate, and it has been called Miami's answer to the La Brea tar pits. So when archaeologist Bob Carr first excavated the Cutler fossil site in the 1980s, the site revealed several meters straight down of bone. Remember, in science, we use the metric system, not imperial. While this assemblage of bone does include a lot of really cool megafauna, like dire wolves, which are a real animal and not just from Game of Thrones, as well as American lions, several extinct bat species, horses, camels, all kinds of fun surprises. There's actually little to no evidence that humans ever interacted with these terrifying species, at least not at this particular site. This is because evidence for human occupation, which, like we talked about last week, includes hearth spaces, places where people may have cooked food or made homes, is very shallow, and we only see cut marks and scorch marks on very small game like rabbits. My colleague Rachel Kangas will eventually do a really great detailed video about megafauna in the archaeological record in Florida, but for today, all we really need to know is that archaeology does sometimes intersect with paleontology, but we only focus on the history of humanity. We only focus on the human part of that story. So this is all well and good and interesting, but what does this mean for the rest of human history after all these animals go extinct? Luckily for us, there is a subfield of archaeology dedicated specifically to studying animal bones on archaeological sites and the ways that humans interacted with animals in the past. This is known as zooarchaeology. They try to find the answers to questions like, when were dogs domesticated in different parts of the world? What did people eat in the past? What were ancient environments or paleo environments like? A lot of zooarchaeological work involves very, very careful lab work. Most zooarchaeologists at some point in their career will spend many months to several years in a lab counting out animal bones. This is to calculate the MNI, or minimum number of individuals. Calculating the minimum number of individuals helps us understand a number of things about paleo environments, or ancient environments. By looking at the kinds of fish species found on a site, they can sometimes figure out the salinity of the water that people were living around or fishing in. They can calculate the amount of people that an environment may have been able to support in order to get population estimates for different archaeological sites. Based on cut marks or scorch marks, they can sometimes reverse engineer hunting or cooking techniques, especially in combination with ethnographic data. When it comes to Florida, we don't have the best environment for preservation. We have a lot of humidity and in many places really acidic ground soil. So unless you get a really low oxygen environment, sort of like a bog or the bottom of, say, a freshwater spring, where many of Florida's megafauna have been found, we really don't see much preserved as far as wood or many other organic materials. But we do see a lot of animal bone, and this is very lucky because this can give us a ton of information about how people used to live in the past. As archaeologists, we're not looking for treasures or gold, we're really looking for information about the past and how people were able to survive. The best source of information about that is not necessarily an elite structure with some sort of temple on it. Some of the most reliable information that we can get about the past actually comes from middens. A midden is basically a fancy science word for an ancient trash pile. If we want to be a little more dignified, we can call it a refuse heap. But in essence, archaeologists spend much of our time digging through very, very old trash. And this is where a lot of zooarchaeology happens specifically, because when a community throws out a ton of trash over time, it starts to build up into a midden. And this is where we see a ton of types of information about how people used to live, in addition to animal bones, which tell us things about the environment and how people were hunting and living, whether they domesticated animals or not, questions like that. Middens also tell us what kind of tools people were using. This is where we find a lot of our pottery that's been broken up. The same kinds of questions that we'd be able to answer about your family if we were to dig through your trash, we can ask in an archaeological context to explore what life may have been like in the past. So to review what we've learned today, archaeology and paleontology are two different sciences. They both study the past, but archaeology studies the human past, and paleontology studies all life on Earth up until the Holocene or modern period. Make sure you tune in on Thursday on Facebook Live for FPAN Southwest's weekly video. Last week, my colleague Rachel Kangas did a demonstration of making a traditional coil pot, so I'm really excited to see what she has in store for us this week. And if you like animals in archaeology and art history, and I know you do, make sure to get your tickets for our live Zoom presentation, Cats Before the Internet. Those are available on our Eventbrite, which I will link in the comments. We hope everyone's having a great week and that you're staying safe.